Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Explore Spiritism program on Kardec Radio. In this program, I share teachings, resources, and reflections to help you along your way as you explore Spiritism. In a recent Spiritist talk that I gave, entitled Jesus, Our Friend, I talked about the idea of friendship being obviously a relationship, but also about seeing our relationship with Jesus as a journey. And in doing so, I discussed some of my own personal experiences in finding out more about Jesus and thinking about him differently than I had in some ways before through different Spiritist texts. I did that as a way to provide some background and a foundation for the conclusions that I shared with details about Jesus as our friend in our daily lives. If you would like to see a recording of that talk, please let me know and I can always share that link. Well, one of the books that I actually shared during that talk is one that I would like to present to you some text from tonight as we discuss the idea of seeing Jesus as our friend, but really just the idea of being able to chat with him as we ask ourselves, what would that be like? So before I get into that, I just want to talk just for a quick moment here on who Jesus is for us as Spiritists, for anyone who might be new catching this video. For us, as Spiritists, Jesus is a spirit not unlike ourselves, however, way more, much more advanced spiritually speaking, evolution-wise, a spiritual evolution, that is. He's also known to us to be the steward of our planet. As for the time Jesus spent here on earth, the way he lived, he left examples that the higher spirits tell us can serve as our highest moral standard to study and follow. The so-called miracles that he performed left illustrations that through Spiritism we can begin to understand not as being supernatural, but as, for example, the mechanics of the laws of nature. And as a teacher, Jesus' moral lessons are wise and ever so relevant. Spiritism demonstrates just how true this is through symbolic interpretation of gospel scriptures and clarifying explanations concerning our evolutionary spirit life. But Jesus is not to be simply understood conceptually or studied for the benefit of philosophical or moral wisdom. As I discussed in that talk that I gave, Jesus can be experienced as a friend. So in that talk, I asked my audience to imagine how awesome it would be if we could sit down beside Jesus and talk to him face to face, like this young man is doing here in this painting called Lost and Found by an artist named Greg Olson. This painting, this image has stayed with me from the first time that I saw it and actually helps me to kind of imagine being in a situation like that. From what has already been stated about Jesus in countless resources and his demonstrated character, Jesus' love is unconditional. On earth, he showed that he was there for everyone, even the most downtrodden or rejected by society. If he were to talk to us like this, he would not only understand what we were thinking and feeling deep inside and why, he would listen to us and speak to us from nothing but love. Sometimes half the battle is just having whoever you are talking to really get where you're coming from, right? And then to, communicate back to you from a place of love, respect, without judgment. So who wouldn't take this chance in a heartbeat to sit and talk to Jesus like this? Now, the book from which, as I mentioned earlier, I would like to share some text with you tonight is one that offers more of a look into what it would be like to converse with Jesus in person, as he did with his closest friends when living here as Jesus of Nazareth. It's a book by the Spirit Neo Lucio called Jesus in the Home. And in this book, the Spirit author describes, as the Spirit Emmanuel states in his foreword, some of the lessons of the Lord as told within the closest circle of his apostles and followers. In each short chapter of this book, Neo Lucio gives us a kind of behind-the-scenes look into what it was like when Jesus met with his disciples in the home of Simon Peter. Different discussions would come up, as you find in the intro to each chapter. And this might be around a particular topic being debated by those present, or questions they had for Jesus after the lessons he delivered in his ministry on that day, or even their own frustrations and struggles as individuals, human beings, in their personal lives and in their attempts to help Jesus deliver his message. Jesus would then address their concerns and bring them clarification and wisdom, usually in the form of a story for them to reflect on. And as you'll read through in this book, if you have the book or you have the chance to get the book and you read through it, you will find some recurring ways in which Jesus's behavior towards his friends and disciples is described. So, for example, how he was so careful and so patient, so often allowing them to hash out an issue amongst themselves before shining his light on the conversation. How when it came time for him to talk, he would pause and think before speaking. How so often the author made it a point to mention Jesus' smile and warm gestures. How it was not uncommon for Jesus to respond not with answers, but with questions, encouraging his listeners to first think for themselves. And how when addressing one single person, he would communicate in a way that best addressed that individual's particular needs. You know what I was reminded of in all of that when I kind of found all those circumstances as a general pattern throughout the book? If you were ever lucky enough to have, when growing up, one of those teachers or professors who was just the best ever, right? You know, who students love to learn from, who treats the students all with respect as equals, that kind of teacher who shows so clearly his or her love for the students and enthusiasm for helping them learn. The teacher who cares about the students and their lives, both in and outside of the classroom, and who students come to consider as not only a teacher, but as a friend. And in some cases, maybe even go on to maintain as lifelong friends. That's a little bit of what I imagine it would be like, in some ways at least, to have a friend and teacher like Jesus, if he could be here alongside us. Now, I want to get into the text that I'm going to present to you tonight. I picked 3 different texts to share. Now, as I mentioned, quite often, actually, I think most of the time in most of the chapters, when Jesus came to talk and shed his light on whatever the topic was, he often used a story to exemplify his lesson, right? Not untypical of his style of sharing parables and stories, analogies in that way. But the three that I picked tonight are really ones in which he gives more direct answers. And I picked them in part because they relate to our topic of kind of what it would be like to sit and talk with Jesus. So as I share these texts, I want you to keep in mind those things that I mentioned about how Jesus's behavior is referenced. And then we're going to take advantage of actually looking at these texts just to reflect on them just a little bit as well. Okay? So the first text is one from this chapter that's called The Tools of Perfection. And I'm going to share the text with you so you can read along, but I did break it out into pieces so that, it'd be easier for you to follow along. Okay, so the text reads, "That night, Simon Peter joined the conversation with his spirit vexed with great discouragement. He had been offended by insensitive, ill-mannered relatives. An elderly uncle had accused him of wasting family assets, and a cousin had threatened to box his ears right there on the street. So he was wearing a burdened and austere face. After the master read a few lines from the sacred writings, the fisherman opened up. He described the conflict with his kin while Jesus listened in silence. When he had finished his lengthy, earnest report, the Lord asked him, 'What did you do, Simon, in response to your inconsiderate relative's onslaught?' 'Well, of course I reacted like I should have,' the disciple answered vehemently. 'I put them both in their proper place. I didn't hold back in pointing out their bad qualities. My uncle is a rare example of stinginess, and my cousin is a consummate liar. In front of a large crowd, I showed that both were hypocrites, and I'm not at all sorry for it.' The master thought for several moments and then began to speak compassionately. 'Peter, what does a carpenter do when he's building a house?' 'Well, of course, he works hard on it,' Peter answered impatiently. 'How?' replied the heavenly friend with a smile. 'With tools.' After Simon's terse response, Christ continued, 'The individuals we are born and live with while on the earth are first and foremost important tools we have received from the Father for building the kingdom of God within us. They are elements for our spiritual growth, and if we fail to take advantage of them, it is nearly always impossible to be victorious by using other means, because the Father has bestowed life's problems on us according to our ability to solve them. The bird has to build a nest, but nothing else is expected of it. The sheep provides wool to the shepherd, but no one expects a ready-made coat from it. People have been granted tasks such as those entailing love and humility as they work intelligently and constantly for the common good, so that peace and happiness may not be only myths. Our closest family members are most often the hammer or saw we can use in building the living and sublime temple by which heaven will manifest in our soul. While the mason uses his tools on the outside, it's up to us to use ours on the inside. On every occasion, unlearned persons represent for us an arena of spiritual merit. The bad person is a challenge that puts our goodness to the test. The ungrateful person is a way for us to practice forgiveness. The sick person is a lesson in our ability to lend aid. Those who behave rightly in the Father's name with respect to difficult or indifferent family members are quickly preparing themselves for the glory of serving humankind, because patience perfects life and time changes everything. Jesus finished, and perhaps because Peter's eyes still had a beseeching look, he added serenely, "If we do not help the needy person who's right there beside us, how can we help afflicted persons who are far away? If we do not love the brother or sister who breathes the same air with us, how can we devote ourselves to the Father in heaven? In light of these questions, no one dared to break the expressive silence that hung in the air of that modest room in Capernaum. So you could imagine, right, if how many people, if they had the chance to talk to Jesus and just be really honest, how many might say, Jesus, man, I just can't with my family, or maybe with a particular family member. Jesus understands. Jesus and our spiritual benefactors, by the way, right? He understands. You can see in this example, he didn't say, come on, they're family, right? He didn't negate the feelings that came up here and that were expressed. And notice that this was described as a lengthy, earnest report given. So this shows that, Jesus' disciples felt comfortable in opening up to him and being honest, right? They don't dog around the questions. They feel confident in opening up. So that's a little what it would be like talking to Jesus. And of course, he always has these teachings. In this more direct answer, as I mentioned, he alludes to what we learn through the clarifying teachings of Spiritism is the way that the process of reincarnation kind of puts us in the right place, the right time, with the right people for our own spiritual growth, so that those individuals in our lives become the tools for us to work on our inner selves. And this lesson exemplifies how charity really starts in the home, but not as a material charity, but as a moral charity, simply meaning watching our behaviors, how we respond to others, giving them the benefit of our indulgence, our tolerance, our patience, and also for our own selves, right? To not disturb our own peace. So what Jesus mentions in the end about devoting ourselves to God is not like meaning is a way of worship, but instead building the kingdom of God within, as he said, simply in a way that's illustrated by Jesus himself as our model. And this is through our behaviors in order to transform ourselves from within, in order to bring more peace, more balance to our inner lives, our emotional and spiritual state, which will bring us better experiences now in this life, later in this life, and down the road, spiritually speaking. The next reading that I want to share is from chapter 19, entitled The Recipe for Happiness. And this one starts out as this: Thaddeus, one of the most passionate speakers during the gospel services at Peter's house, was enthusiastically discussing the rules for human happiness and was speaking out against the Roman conquerors and the rabbis of the Sanhedrin. In the grips of such obvious rebelliousness, he spoke at great length about the discord and suffering that reigned among the people, placing the blame on the political shortcomings of the time. After he had expounded several valuable opinions on the subject, Jesus asked him, Thaddeus, what is your idea of happiness? Lord, happiness is peace for all. Christ displayed a meaningful expression on his face, and he offered, Yes, Thaddeus, I am aware of that. However, I would like to know what would make you personally truly happy. With a certain amount of hesitation, the disciple replied, Master, I think I would experience supreme tranquility if others could understand me. Who can't relate to that? For that to happen, I wish that those close to me wouldn't disdain my noble and pure intentions. I know that I make a lot of mistakes because I'm human, but I would be happy if those who are part of my life would acknowledge my sincere intentions of doing the right thing. I would experience blessed joy if I could trust others and receive from them the fair consideration that I feel I deserve because of my high ideals. I long for everyone's respect so that I can work with no hindrances. I would be delighted if slander were to forget about me. I live hoping for cordiality from others, and I think the world would be a paradise if people who tread the same path would treat each other with the same respect with which I myself would like to be treated. Indifference and malicious lies wound my heart. I believe that sarcasm and suspicion were invented by the spirits of darkness to torment people. Ungodliness is like bile when directed at me. Cruelty is a phantom of pain when it comes out to meet me. Because of all this, I would be happy if my family members, close friends, and fellow citizens would regard me not for what I appear to be due to the imperfections of my body, but rather for the amount of goodwill that I believe I have in my soul. Most of all, Lord, I would be extremely happy if all those with me on life's journey would grant me the right to freely experience my own kind of personal happiness, as long as I abide by the code of good in the field of my conscience, without irony and irrelevant criticism. In short, Master, with the blessed recourse of suffering and time, I would like to be understood, respected, and held in esteem by others, even though I may not yet be the model of perfection that heaven would like me to be. The disciples stopped talking and displayed an obvious curiosity about what Christ would say about the matter. Some of his companions expected that heavenly friend to make a long speech, but the master affixed his crystal clear eyes on the disciple and said frankly yet kindly, "Thaddeus, if you desire happiness and contentment from the entire world, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. If everyone would follow that rule, we would very quickly spread the glories of heaven across the earth." I'm guessing that a lot of us can relate to what Thaddeus was feeling and expressing. We see a lot of people expressing things like this. I think it's very relevant to what we're living through right now and what a lot of us feel. But take a look at how Jesus answered, right? Going back to that golden rule, which reminds us, or which teaches us that, look, reap what you sow, right? Not sow what you have reaped. Like, don't only take how others treat you and then turn around and treat them that way. It's the opposite. And again, it goes back to what we were talking about before with the individuals in our lives being tools to put ourselves to the test, or opportunities to exercise the moral virtues that we're trying to develop. Really to make our own lives and the lives of others better. And second, notice how Jesus said that, if everyone would follow that rule, we would very quickly spread the glories of heaven across the earth. So he's not saying, do it if everybody else does it. He's saying, do it. If everyone would do it together, we would advance very quickly. He knows that we're taking the pace that collectively, as the collection of all of ourselves as individuals, the pace that we choose by the way that we use our own free will. So if we're not advancing faster than we are, it's a question of the choices that we're making. And so it's not necessarily going to be a back-to-back action and reaction. It's not because you start behaving a certain way today that tomorrow your life is going to go from 0 to 100 in terms of your level of enjoyment and peace, satisfaction that you get, and happiness. So we're here to learn, to grow, and all of these experiences are part of it. Unfortunately, Spiritism helps us to see the bigger picture where we can understand that better. Okay, I have just one more reading that I want to share with you from this book, and this one is entitled, as you can see here, The Rule of Helping. And this one starts out, at the height of youthful curiosity, John realized that he was facing a new way of life. Such was the greatness with which the gospel shone through in the Lord's teachings. You can imagine, right? It's kind of like becoming a turning point for him, where he's saying, whoa, I'm going to be living my life differently now. This is all new. It probably feels like a great shift. So he asked Jesus what the most dignified way would be for disciples to act towards their neighbor in the sense of helping others. The divine friend responded with a clear and firm voice. He says, John, if you're seeking a rule of thumb by which to help others while at the same time helping yourself, remember to love your companions of your earthly journey as much as you would like to be loved and helped by them. Here we get back to that same lesson of the other chapter again. But take notice of where Jesus is saying, look, help yourself too. Nowhere are we told that we need to, sacrifice our lives to the point of neglecting ourselves. To the contrary, we are actually encouraged to really spiritually nourish ourselves, give ourselves some loving care. But as you're going to see in what I read, Jesus was very direct in his answer here. And I think that he probably even answered John in the way that speaks best to John. I could imagine John being someone that says, like, look, not a story, just please, just go straight to the point, right? Because Jesus said, if you're seeking a rule of thumb, he probably knows that that's what John wants. And then he goes on to illustrate with some kind of detailed bullet points, if you will, that sort of seem like, in today's world, it could be like Jesus on stage giving a TED Talk on how to help others while helping yourself. So I'm going to go ahead and read that for you. He says to John, here's your rule of thumb. Under the pretext of fostering the truth, don't make your life a battle in which your feet walk the earth like a fierce warrior in the desert. Remember that most ill persons already realize to some degree what their illness is, and so they need friendship and understanding more than they need medicine. Bear in mind that there's not one soul on earth who doesn't have difficult problems to resolve. Because of this, learn how to show fraternal courtesy toward all of them. Welcome your travel companions, not merely with the greeting suggested by rules of etiquette, but also with the warmth of your sincere desire to serve. Gaze into the eyes of people as they talk to you, observing their kind interest, and always be a tactful and attentive listener. Don't raise your voice too loudly, because the certainty and serenity with which the most serious of matters should be dealt does not depend on how loudly they are discussed. Refrain from taking part in futile conversations. Undignified comments are always a criminal invasion into personal matters. Praise those who are industrious, and even when faced with those who are evil and lazy, try to exalt the good they are capable of doing. Flee pessimism, but wisely keep up your guard when dealing with individuals who are enterprising and carrying out respectable yet fleeting business in the world. Unproductive melancholy, which knows only how to complain, has never been useful to mankind, who is in need of good spirits. Make daily use of the shiny key of a friendly smile. It is with a spontaneous gesture of kindness that we can ward off many crimes and erase many wrongs. Do your best to always be punctual. Don't make your friends wait for you so that you are not attributed a false sense of importance. Give thanks for all the blessings along the way, acknowledging both the large and the small ones. If the sun provides warmth for life, the grain of wheat provides our daily bread. Allow the living, invisible waters of love that proceed from God our Father to flow through your heart to benefit the realm of struggle in which you live. Love is the divine force that enriches life and bestows power. Above all, let us do the best we can to aid in the happiness and spiritual growth of everyone around us, not just here, but everywhere, not just today, but always. Christ became silent, and acknowledging the beauty of this plan, the young apostle asked him respectfully, "Lord, how am I to fulfill such meaningful teachings?" The master responded resolutely, "Goodwill is our resource each and every hour." And patting the troubled apostle on the head, he brought the evening's prayer session to a close. So we have it right there, right? Jesus is just saying, look, try again every day, each and every hour. Renew your will, right? Even when you reach these difficult moments, sometimes we have setbacks. Take a deep breath and renew your goodwill, and you will get there. So that's it for tonight. I hope you've enjoyed taking a peek into this book and perhaps consider it as a resource you might want to pick up. It is also a book that is recommended for example, Gospel at Home meetings. And if you don't know what the Gospel at Home meetings are, I did one of the episodes of this program on it. Feel free to let me know. I'd be happy to share that link. I would encourage all of you to think about what you might discuss with Jesus if you could, and perhaps incorporate that into some of your prayers. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to reach out to us either at Kardec Radio or at Explore Spiritism. I wish you and your loved ones a great next couple of weeks, and I'll see you next time. Good night, and God bless.